So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about value today. So sometimes we have these experiences in life that like hurt, and they can make us feel less like people, like they're even dehumanizing. And, we look around and we see like other people being treated with value, and sometimes we don't get treated with value. And that hurts so much that like our mind has to come up with a reason why that person is treating me that way. Because the idea that I'm just like, I'm not worth it is so painful in and of itself, and that I have to rationalize or justify or excuse that person's behavior. Because if we can excuse someone else's behavior, then it's not that we don't lack value. They're not actually treating us appropriately. There's a reason they're treating us that way. So it's like okay for them to do that to us. And it's bizarre because in that moment, by giving the other person an excuse, you're protecting your own sense of value. But then what happens is that becomes maladaptive very, very quickly. And then what happens is like we start giving people excuses for mistreating us. Because when we give them an excuse, then it's not our fault to like, I'm not actually a bad person. This person was just raised in such a way. And like, that's just, has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with them. And so we start to create these solutions where we protect ourselves from what they do to us by giving them an excuse. And that's actually what screws us. Because then suddenly no one is doing anything wrong. And at the end of the day, you're still getting hurt. And if you're getting hurt and no one's to blame, then like, what do you do with that? And that's when you end up like stuck interpersonally with other people. That's where you end up with like trust issues and all these other like weird manifestations of propagating unhealthy relationships because you're not willing to hold the responsible parties responsible. And so when you give them that excuse, you take away from yourself the capacity to forgive. You take away from yourself the capacity to move on. Because remember, if they didn't do anything wrong, then what is there to forgive? And so you're kind of stuck in this limbo where there's pain that you kind of defend against, but you hold no one responsible, and therefore you can't forgive because they didn't do anything wrong, and then you're kind of stuck. And you end up in this weird like limbo where like it just feels weird, like relationships feel off to you. And this especially happens with people in your life that you love. Because the more you love them, the harder it is to accept that they did something hurtful to you, because that hurts way more. So the more you love them, the more you make excuses for them. The more you make excuses for them, the more it isn't their fault. And the more it isn't their fault, there's no need to forgive. Everyone's hunky-dory. Everything's great. No need for forgiveness. I can hang out with him tomorrow. Everything's great. Except they did do that thing to you. And it did hurt. And it does hurt. Another week goes by, they do it again. Another excuse. No forgiveness. No responsibility. No need for change. And then your hurt builds up a little bit. But no. I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to be a nice person. It's not their fault. They were raised by really abusive parents, so it's okay if they hit me. That's just the way they were raised. And so it's devastating. It's difficult because like part of the reason you're stuck is because you can't forgive. And part of the reason people ask me, how do I move past stuff? How do I let go? You have to like forgive, right? You have to accept. You have to forgive. But you can't do that as long as you deny there's a problem. And the reason that you deny there's a problem is because it hurts to admit that there is a problem. And so in a bizarre way, if you want to start moving forward, I know this sounds bizarre, because people are going to tell you that like blaming is what gets people stuck. But especially with those you love, start with blame. Start by holding people responsible for what they're doing. Start by holding yourself responsible for what you do. And then comes the hard part, right? Because we're really good at holding ourselves responsible and beating ourselves up. I'm going to do better tomorrow. I'm going to work harder tomorrow. Next time it's going to be different. And then you beat yourself up. So when it comes to yourself, you need to do the second piece, which is forgive. So assign responsibility, accept it, forgive, and that's when you can be free. That's when your relationship can get better. That's when you can start to move forward. But you have to start by calling it what it is. If someone mistreats you, call them out on it. If you love them anyway, you can say, hey, like, I care about you, but like what you did wasn't good. And it hurt. And when it comes to yourself, If you blame yourself way too much, learn how to forgive. Like, yeah, you did screw up, but that's okay because no one's perfect. And you're going to do your best next time. And that you are in your own corner. That you're willing to give yourself another shot. So be careful, because the things that we do to protect ourselves from hurt are the things that sign us up for more hurt down the road. And you have to understand what you're doing to yourself. And once you begin to understand what you're doing to yourself, you can start to change it. Try to change it. Do your best. Just like today. Right? If we look at Aaron, like what he did wonderfully was like at that very last point, I don't know how else to say this, but we talked about it for a while. And then he didn't get to it until we pointed out what he does to protect himself. And if you guys are trying to clean the hurt, you have to take off the shell first. And then you can get out in there and clean it up. So be careful about the things that you tell yourself to protect yourself from being hurt. And try not telling yourself those things. Let yourself feel that hurt. Let the consequences flow. Sit with them, and then you can move forward.